Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is our first live stream, and we imagine that people will start pouring in any second. So let's just give everybody a minute to start coming in and saying hello. I've got 4 people so far. Please say hello in the chat, in the comments. Hi, Warren. Let us know where you are in the world. Welcome, Mike. Earlier, Mike helped us to. Joan, hello. Mike helped us to do a test run to make sure that we had this software thing worked out. Okay, we got 15 people, and I'm sure building up. We have a crackle mic somewhere. I think that fixed it. Whoever it was.
It was Kate.
Okay, so welcome everybody. First live stream, and we're here with Dr. Nick Walker, who wrote the book that everyone is talking about, Neuroqueer Heresies, and thankfully the book is kind of all things neurodiversity. So we have a lot to talk about today, and we'll be taking your questions as we move through. And I'm Tara Vance. I am the CEO of Neuroqueer, and my pronouns are any pronouns. I am genderqueer and I guess gender vague, and I'm of Indigenous, Romani, Irish, Melungeon heritage. And I'm very happy to be here with my friends, and I will let them introduce themselves.
I guess I'll go. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheyenne. I am Neuroclassic's board chair and pronouns she, her. And I am excited to be here. That's about it.
Jude?
Hey, my name is Jude Afalake Oluboden. I'm here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My pronouns are he, him. I am an educator and I teach in mutual liberation and harm reduction. And I'm Nigerian American and Blackfoot Indian. And I'm happy to be here.
And Dr. Walker?
Hello, I'm Nick, and I'm a queer autistic trans woman, a professor of psychology at California Institute of Integral Studies. And my pronouns are she, her. Ancestry is Eastern European Jewish. And I'm the author of this book, Neuroqueer Heresies, which supposedly people are talking about, which is exciting. And I'm really happy to be here. Big fan of Neuroclastic. And I actually don't know any of my fellow panelists except for Oswin. So I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone in this process too, and to actually being in an actual live conversation with Oswin for the first time as well.
Oswin?
Yes, and I was just saying to Tara like 10 minutes ago, I'm like, this is the first time I've ever talked to Nick, like vocally. We've known each other for 10 years now or something like that. I don't know. It's been forever. I am a autistic adult. I am genderqueer. If you're going very specific with genderqueer, then propagender is my gender. It's a thin, narrow thing between being a butch female and a feminine guy. Like there's that range in there. My pronouns are Faye Fayer, and I run Foundations for Divergent Minds, and I do consulting specifically towards clinicians that are looking to become more neurodiversity oriented in their practice.
And Kate.
Hey, I'm Kate. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm also Neuroplastics Chief Communications Officer. I'm queer. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm in Manchester in the UK, but I'm Welsh. And I don't know much about my heritage, but I identify with being Welsh for sure.
Tara, can I go back and tell my heritage? I forgot.
Please do.
I am Choctaw and have some English-Irish mixture in there somewhere too, but the identity I claim is Choctaw.
Okay, so that's us, and welcome everybody. Again, anytime, leave your questions for any of the panelists in the chat. We're going to be super casual with this and just have a conversation and include you in that. And we will do our best. We are all autistic, so limited filter, but we'll do our best to keep our language friendly enough for family settings, because we know that a lot of you are watching from home and parenting at the same time. So we will try. But yeah, welcome. So we have published a review and an interview from David Gray Hammond, who absolutely loved the book, as everyone I've talked to has. And that was exciting. We know that a lot of people just responded about how they were so excited to finally have a copy of something that seems like it is real and meaningful, and it didn't gloss over anything. It went to the deep dives in the heart of the issues that the autistic community faces, and it was intersectional and just powerful. And Kate had something that just really, as a psychotherapist, resonated. And I think it'd be a perfect starting point. Do you want to start with that, Kate?
Sure. And so I was talking with Lucy, who's in the chat earlier, who's also a psychotherapist, and the two of us work with neurodivergent children a lot. And we noticed that your book is dedicated to the weird kids. And there's that beautiful Michael Meade quote. He says, our essential task in life is to awaken to the way that the eternal would speak through us, to learn to live our intended personality in the inner weirdness that makes us unique torchbearer of the flame of life. Firstly, I think that the people who work with our children, our autistic, our neurodivergent children, should all be reading your book. Like, I feel like it should be standard. But I was wondering, like, what do you most think people who work with autistic children should be doing right
now? Lovely question. And we're getting crackling from your microphone.
I'm going to turn it right off.
Yes. When you're actually speaking, I don't hear the crackle. Yes, lovely question. So people working with autistic children. For one thing, I think it's important for anyone who's in the therapy professions, and especially who works with children, to be actively lobbying against ABA. to really be speaking out against that, but also very much, my book and my work is about, positive alternatives and the importance of having something better to aim for. There is, I actually teach psychotherapy in, in my work as a psychology professor. I train psychotherapists, and the state of things in the overall field of child therapy is pretty great. We have this big movement over, in recent decades, increasingly towards non-directive play therapy, where children get to just work through whatever they're working through in play. And for some reason, that autistic children are the one group that's never given space to do that. And ABA is like, you do like the 40-hour-a-week ABA thing. Children don't get the space to do play and to have their lives as children, where play really is the most important thing. So I think actively advocating for play therapy for autistic children is crucial, and doing play therapy with them. And I think what happens is that parents and untrained neurotypical therapists freak out when they start watching autistic children play, because autistic children, of course, don't play like non-autistic children. We have different styles of play. We'll do things, lining up toys and such, lining everything up and sorting it. And that's a prelude, though. That's sort of a way into imaginary symbolic play. But this attachment to neurotypical developmental timelines means that it's expected that autistic kids, are like, if they don't leap right into an imaginative symbolic play that can be recognized as such by neurotypicals, immediately parents and professionals leap to this catastrophic assumption that we're incapable of imaginative and symbolic play. And so it's vitally important to dispel that myth and to give autistic children the space to find their way into that sort of play. And then also, in terms of, like, there's so much concern about, teaching social skills, and that usually means, of course, imposing neuronormative social skills, and very specifically, I think, neuronormative and like heteronormative and white social skills are what's consistently gets imposed on autistic children. It's a very narrow vision of what the right way to do social skills are, but it is good to be socially versatile, and for autistic children to have this versatility of naturally autistic styles of sociality, and be able also to adapt in neurotypical social environments and stuff. And I think the best way to teach that is really theater. There's a lovely book called Creativity and Community Among Autism Spectrum Youth, edited by Peter Smagorinsky. And some of the language is a little more pathologizing than I'd like, but it's a lovely book of, like, these are, just methods of getting groups of kids together to play and do theater and create, and social competence is developed that way. And ABA doesn't develop social competence, it just develops social compliance. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. More play, more theater.
And that was beautiful. And I think I have recently met Jude and just have so much enjoyed working with him since. And Jude focuses a lot on decolonizing our approaches to therapy, to parenting, to education. And to back off the back of what Dr. Walker just said, Jude, do you want to talk a little bit about how important it is to decolonize our approaches to children, especially, and what that looks like and how that benefits autistic children?
Of course. I want to say I am a father of two, also neurodivergent children, and I homeschool. And with it, it's very important to decolonize our mindset when it comes to raising pretty much in ourselves and raising children, but especially autistic children, because I feel like what people run into when they feel is like most difficult in the walls that they run into, or like the anger and the frustration, is trying to adhere to a status quo in a society that wishes you dead, that does not that values your worth on how productive you are. And if you're not productive within those constraints, then you have no worth. And if you're holding both yourself and your child to those same constraints, then you're going to be stressed out. Then you're going to cause harm for not only your child and yourself. And you're going to get caught in this loop that was never meant to actually help you seek healing, that was never actually meant for you to actually move forward and be in community. It's like, one example I like to use is like, I'm against cognitive behavioral therapy. Like a lot of people, like they say, like it teaches how to tie their shoes, for example. It's like, and if you don't know how to tie your shoes this certain way, then you're not considered valuable. But when there's a lot of disabilities, especially like comorbid disabilities that come with autism and plenty of other things, where tying your shoes with laces is very difficult. But there's also plenty of slip-ons. There's plenty of slip-on shoes that look amazing, and your worth should not be considered because you need to wear slip-on shoes, and that they don't make slip-on shoes accessible. So really, when it comes to decolonizing your mindset, and since I've been on this journey to do that, it's honestly helped me to heal my inner child. Okay. I want milk. Okay, go get milk. That's Persephone. Yeah, so like what's really helped me is like figuring out what I needed, and being told that, not being told that I'm wrong for being who I am, that I'm not wrong because I don't like to be touched a certain way, and or that I don't like to dress a certain way. And it's like, why do I have to actually dress like this? Why do I have to be like this? Like even in my own journey to really coming out that I am a man and understanding that I'm a man, even in my own community, in the queer community, a lot of it was a struggle because we were adhering to white patriarchal cis hetero standards of what a man has to look like. A man has to dress a certain way. You have to have this dysphoria because you don't have, you don't look like this, you don't have like this, you don't act like this. But the thing is, like, I am a man, this is a man's body, and that's all it is, that's all it takes, that I know my identity, and I don't have to adhere to any other standards for that to be me. And that even like, I don't believe in the word, the nuclear family that's imposed on us, because it is so isolating. Because even if your child is not autistic, it's hard to do by yourself. And being considered in just like this marriage that it's considered like you're only supposed to get your love and your care and your respect from this one person who you might be going through a lot of things, especially in this pandemic. If the only people that you have is each other to raise each other, it's really hard to do by yourselves rather than seeking community. But we're taught by staying in this bubble and staying in this colonized mindset that you have to do it by yourself. And if you can't do it by yourself, it's your fault any harm you endure, rather than the system, this colonized system is the problem. And so for you to actually seek healing and actually to seek love and support and care, and to actually treat each other as human beings, because you are human beings, and that's all that it takes for your worth is your humanity, that you exist. That's it. We have to decolonize our mindset.
Yes, thank you. I could just feel, several of the things you said just resonating. And in our panelists too, I could just see those facial expressions that you said some things that really just um, were powerful. Oswin, I have learned so much of everything that I know from just observing you working with therapists and instructing therapists who mostly do intervention therapies for children. And if you wouldn't mind to take a minute to talk about what you think are some of the biggest problems facing with therapy and how our kids are being treated and what needs to change.
Oh goodness, that's a loaded question, and so many layers. There's a lot. There's so very much. I think one of the, I mean, obviously we've already spoken about ABA, but I think the problem isn't just ABA. And I don't know how to get this across to a lot of clinicians, because they think that because they don't use that, suddenly they're neurodiversity aligned. I'm like, what? No, that's not the way this works. You have to go like a lot further than that. There needs to be this whole paradigm shift with you. And what I see more often with clinicians, and I've been kind of harping on this on the past couple of days and on some people's pages, is this idea that you can do these wording changes and you can change these goals to be, instead of this one, let's do a strengths-based goal. Well, guess what? You are still like making a value judgment on what is a strength and what is a deficit and what should be worked on and how it should be done, without ever taking into consideration, like, how does this skill work into the community the person is in? How can we do this and be respectful of their culture and respectful of their neurology and doing all the things that they are, and developing in the way that we naturally do? Because, like, I'm going to just point out that I think that most of us weren't diagnosed until adulthood. I'm not sure. Yeah, we have bunches of trauma. I'm not going to say that, but like that trauma is not because we're wrong. That trauma is because of everyone else. And really, that basis of like, we just need to help do these goals so that we can become adults in this way. And like, no, we need a lot more support. We need all of this to be structured around the ways that we interact. And even when I'm listening to, sorry, I'm missing names because that pop-up keeps on making everyone's names disappear. And I'm terrible with names and it's not popping back up. Okay. He was saying, and I forgot your name, top right corner. Jude, thank you. Yes, about the decolonizing. And I've been, being Choctaw, but also being Choctaw means that my tribe was heavily colonized, and we accepted it. And even last night I was watching a video by a Choctaw historical scholar who's like, and we are proud that we did this because it meant our people survived. And I'm like, no, this is bad, because all of this that we are looking at, even let's be real, Nick's work on neuroqueering, along with Remy Yergo's and Athena's stuff, all really helped me get to this point of being able to recognize that I didn't need to be the white man's caricature of what I'm supposed to be. And by doing that, I got to this point of decolonization of myself. And now I'm seeing how we treat kids. And I'm seeing how my kids are treated. And I'm seeing how everyone else's kids are treated. And how much work it takes to get people out of this mindset that we need to be changed. We need to have all these things about us changed. We need to... I get an email saying, hey, how do I motivate your kid to go back to class? Well, what changed? Why did that stop? Why did they why did that child stop wanting to go to class? Because that doesn't just happen. It's not a matter of motivation. There is something that happened. Turns out medication was too much, and like we need to dial back on something, and like that's not a big deal, but like the first thought is, why can't we motivate my kid to go to class? It's not about motivation. It's never about motivation, because we are intrinsically motivated to learn, to think, to be with other people. And it's only when those things start to break down and we are no longer feeling safe in those environments. But we can't seem to get past this mindset of, we just need to do more to help these people. And like especially with clinicians, even the neurodiversity aligned clinicians, they think that they've gotten out of the medical model of disability and gone into the social model of disability. Guess what? They haven't. They've gone into the charity model of disability. This is about helping us and making us feel like, oh, we're giving you this spotlight. No, this is our spotlight. This belongs to us. And if we can't get past that mindset that clinicians are the gold standard and we are coming in to support them, no, they're there. You're supposed to be there to help support the people, that the disabled kids, the neurodivergent kids. That's where we're supposed to be going with all this. And if you're not there, then you're not neurodiversity aligned.
I'd like to add on a little bit to that, because what you said was very important. I'd like to concentrate on, you talk about like your Choctaw and how like they said they were proud to do this to survive. And I mean, they are right in one thing, like it did help them survive. It colonized. The important word to remember there is like survive, and it's a colonized survival technique, and it's mirroring white supremacy, because of what we're taught is that so a lot of the times people don't understand, or they get a little bit, it's like, though a lot of the things like Black people can't be racist, but it's because within capitalism and within this system that we are not assigned worth, that whiteness assigned worth, and those trying to gain whiteness and trying to be closer to that. But Black people have never, it's always based on the fact that Black people are on the bottom. But that does not mean that we cannot mirror white supremacy, that we cannot be anti-Black. And so part of like with the with the Choctaw and Indigenous people, it's erasure. And that the erasure, that the fact that like we're diagnosed so late in life, and also so many of us who are Indigenous, that we find this connection to our Indigenous people later on in life because of their erasure and the genocide, of how if you don't find that connection, then we cannot claim our land, then we cannot claim our identity, we cannot claim our rights. It's better to, on top of the genocide, to erase, and so for you to mirror white supremacy so that you're surviving, so that your body is still proficient for capitalism. But the thing is, like, though you've survived, that does not mean that you're not harming yourself. That does not mean that you are not continuing generational trauma that is setting up pretty much physiologically, our bodies are not capable to continue doing it. And then we're punished because we cannot continue doing this. That our bodies, I have a lot of autistic people. We have intracranial hypertension, and mine is pretty bad. And a lot of what they try to say that it's based on is like overweight. It's of like, if you lose weight, then the condition will go away. But it wasn't until recently that I was confirmed that it's more of a stress-induced and trauma-induced condition. So I can't work a traditional job. I've tried, and I'll start having seizures, and I won't be able to walk. I can't see, all of that. My body cannot adhere to traditional capitalism because of not only the stress and trauma I've gone through, but generational back, what my mother went through, what my mother's mother went through. So just because this is what you did to survive, it doesn't mean that it's okay. And it does not mean that you don't have every right to put your foot down and say that it's not okay, to say that this is harming me, to say that you have took my connection to my people, and I refuse for you to take that from me any longer. Take my identity, my land, my people, my right to exist and live. And that's part of what's like really important to remember is that a lot of this is us mirroring white supremacy. And yes, it'll probably keep us alive, but for how long? And how long will our children be alive? Like, how long will these generations actually suffice for so long? Because it's been like, yeah, it's like, oh, all of these people before us, they did it. And it's like, but how long can we actually operate under these standards without our bodies breaking down? And then we're blamed for our bodies breaking down for the system that stole so much from us. But we don't have to let them steal anything else. And there's nothing wrong for you demanding for pretty much everything being stolen from you.
And I want to add to that too. Very recently found out that after seeing a video about it on TikTok that just came up in my feed, and it put my family's DNA, like my very immediate ancestors' DNA, and said that we are Black and Indigenous and Romani. And I started digging into my ancestry, and I feel understanding that, and Irish, and we all went to West Virginia and Kentucky and the mountain areas and kept each other alive by erasing our cultures and trying to appear white so that we could have land ownership rights and we could pass on an inheritance. And they stayed alive, and I'm here. But I'm so angry that I spent so much of my life. I knew, just like I knew I was autistic, I didn't become these things when I found out about it. I have always been this, just like I've always been autistic, but didn't know, until I was older. And I'm angry at that. And I just thank you for what you said, because and one of the first things that Jude and I talked about is we both have intracranial hypertension and these chronic health issues that autistic people have. And I would try to teach, and I would look down at my book, and I would lose 100% of my vision while I was standing in front of the classroom. And I tried to fake that I wasn't blind when I talked to my kids. And twice I went into work in sepsis and multiple organ failure because I just learned that I'm not allowed to show how traumatized I am by trying to survive and in a world like this. And so I have carried all that generational trauma, and I pretended the whole time, I had a doctor tell me there's no way medically that you're alive, but I had gone to work that day. And that's just the level of stress that we have to perform under every day so that we mask that we're on death's doorstep, literally. And, I'm covered in surgical scars, and it's just been really hard. And so I'm so grateful to everybody who's doing this work, because we can't keep up. It's not healthy, and there's no reason that we should. We have better ways to do things. Dr. Walker, you coined the term neuroqueer, and you've done all the foundational work on that. Can you explain what that is to our audience?
Yeah, sure. So there's my work is around what I'm calling neuroqueer theory these days, which essentially extends queer theory into the realm of neurodiversity. And so a crucial idea, central idea in queer theory is, which comes to us largely from Judith Butler's work originally, is this idea that it's anti-essentialist idea, like gender is not something that you're born with, and you're either born with, a male brain or a female brain. But gender is, we have our tendencies, we have our proclivities, but gender is a learned performance. It's a series of actions and embodied ways of being that we're trained to internalize and perform. And there's massive pressure on all scales, external pressure from birth or before birth to conform to these heteronormative binary gender roles. And so when you have this idea of, okay, this is an embodied performance, this is heteronormativity, a way that we learn to be and internalize, then we get the idea that the performance can be queered, which means it can be subverted, it can be creatively tampered with, and it can be challenged, defied, creatively diverged from. Now, some of us are born able to fit into a heteronormative binary gender role, the assigned, whichever one is assigned to us. Some of us are born somewhat able to fit into that with comfort, like we could pass as the gender we're assigned. And some of us, it's just not a bearable fit. But anyone is capable of, everyone has to have this heteronormative gender role taught to them and imposed on them. It's a performance, it's learned, and anyone's capable of queering it. That queer is not necessarily something that a person is born. You're either queer or you're not, but queer is something that one does by diverging from heteronormativity and by creatively subverting heteronormativity in one's own life or on a cultural level. Anyway, that's a little Queer Theory 101 that forms kind of the foundation for this idea of neuroqueering. So two ideas form the foundation of neuroqueer theory. And one is the idea that neuronormativity can be queered just like heteronormativity. And just like heteronormativity, some people are born able to fit into imposed neuronormativity. We call those people neurotypical, if they're performing neuronormativity and it's working reasonably well for them, the same way that like we call someone cisgender if heteronormativity is working really reasonably well for them. If their assigned gender role is working reasonably well for them, doesn't mean it's natural, just means they can fit within it. But so some of us, if we're autistic, we're just not going to fit into neuronormativity. But anybody can queer neuronormativity. Anybody can decide to diverge from neuronormative performance, just like anyone can decide to diverge from heteronormative performance. The other foundational principle or premise of neuroqueer theory is the idea that heteronormativity and neuronormativity are not separate things, that they're thoroughly entwined. If you're learning when you're learning neuronormative performance, how to perform normal, how to perform neurotypicality, you're also learning heteronormative performance. And if you look at the performances of neurotypicality that people try to impose on autistic kids, they are very much heteronormative performances as well. The two are thoroughly entwined, which also means that if you queer one enough, you're also queering the other. So if you are living, embodying your autistic self and not being constrained by trying to fit within neuronormativity, you're also queering your gender performance whether it's intentional or not. You can intentionally queer it or not, but autistic embodiment also diverges from heteronormativity as well as from neuronormativity. So there's those two ideas, the entwined nature of neuronormativity and heteronormativity, that they're inseparable facets of some larger complex of imposed normativity. And then this idea of neurocognitive performance and embodied cognition being queerable in the same way that gender is queerable.
Thank you so much for that. I know that I just want to say I love queer as a verb and queering things. That is amazing. So we are going to, every time that we do a live stream, we're going to have we're going to advertise an autistic-led business and or an autistic-owned small business. This is the only way that we do advertisements. We don't have any ads on our website or on anything, but we are going to advertise an autistic-led business every time that we do a live stream, and we plan on doing these a lot more often after this one. And so we have with us Sarah Salvaggi Hernandez, the autistic OT, who is going to announce this first business.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Wonderful. Thank you. Before I do the announcement, I just want to take a moment to say, Dr. Walker, thank you so much. Your work is transformative, and I appreciate everything about you. So thank you. Today's advertisement is for Ludar Animal Behavior. Ludar Animal Behavior offers behavior management, training, and wellness services for a wide variety of animal species. They use evidence-based science and focus on fortifying the human-animal bond. In addition to helping pet parents, they also provide educational resources to mental health professionals, social workers, veterinarians, zookeepers, wildlife rehabbers, trainers, groomers, and many other professions. Beyond animal services, Ludar provides their lived experience and professional expertise to provide consulting services for professionals and individuals with a focus on decolonization training for organizations or one-on-one peer support services. They utilize an anti-oppression framework rooted primarily in Romani and indigenous wisdom to help individuals, businesses, and organizations to develop an in-depth analysis of racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, and other forms of bigotry. They provide in-person services in the state of Ohio or virtual services worldwide. Visit them at ludaranimalbehavior.com.
Thank you so much. And we put the link to that in the chat. And, I think we have, no, we don't. Okay, so now we want to, let's just chat about some things that, Dr. Walker, I see you all the time in therapist spaces, and you have, sometimes you just come in and you drop the mic. You just walk into the middle of a big conversation and drop the mic, and that's it. There's not much to say after that. But you have really, I want to talk a little bit about behaviorist approaches. And you said something that that I think it hadn't occurred to me before. You talked about how ABA therapy, which is probably the most discussed topic in our community, is atheoretical. and that was a problem with having discussions about it, and also, doing anything to meaningfully change the field. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by it's atheoretical and what the implications are for autistic children who are subjected to ABA therapy?
I don't even remember using the word atheoretical, but I'll claim credit for it if you want, because it sounds really smart. But the the theory behind it is not sound, and that's behaviorism as a scientific theory has actually been discredited for a long time. Actually, Noam Chomsky, who I think these days is thought of more as sort of like a liberal political commentator, is a linguist by profession and got his start as a linguist. And where he first really came into the public eye was publishing critiques of behaviorism, because behaviorism for a few really bleak decades was the dominant paradigm in psychology, in the academic and professional world. And Chomsky just tore it apart. Skinner published his ridiculous book on behaviorist theories of language development. And Chomsky, as a linguist who specifically studied language development in child, just tore apart the whole thing and really showed, the emperor has no clothes. There's just the theory doesn't hold up. And at this point, we've had things happen like old research assistants of B.F. Skinner's have come forward to say, even his studies with rats and pigeons were actually falsified to some degree, that he would halt the experiment if it started going in a direction that didn't support his theories. And so there's nothing evidence-based about behaviorism. Evidence doesn't support it. And it's a garbage theory. It's garbage pseudoscience. You look at the basic premise is that internal states don't matter in behaviorism. The basic premise, and this is why it's failed, for instance, as a paradigm for psychotherapy, because you can't use it to treat trauma. You can use it to create trauma, but you can't heal trauma with it because it doesn't acknowledge internal states. All you can do is condition people to hide their symptoms, which actually makes trauma worse. So essentially, behaviorism as a scientific paradigm is like a zombie. It was killed a long time ago and has somehow managed to maintain this like undead, shambling around, hurting people state because of ABA. And ABA is like the one big, like, this is how behaviorism continues to exist because autism, because of the autistophobic panic in society that's like, we have to do anything we can to destroy autism and to keep people from, moving autistically, and to force these children into neuronormativity. So that's the ABA industry is like the only place where behaviorism survives, because it's the only place where people are in such a state of panic in, this autistophobic societal panic that we live in, that's much like, anti-gay panic, or the anti-trans panic that's really coming up in the UK these days, or the anti-communist panic of the 1950s in the US. It's like this state of societal panic that keeps people from thinking clearly. And so they're not examining the theoretical underpinnings the way that people might look at the theory behind some other practice. If it were non-autistic kids, people would look at the theory behind the practice and say, wait, this doesn't hold up.
Nick, I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
that I don't think this is secluded to autism. I think that this is a lot of parenting practices just across the board. And that this has some real implications getting even into adult relationships, where we are taught that if we don't reciprocate in the right way, then we are not showing love for another person. That if we're not doing all these things, that we if we are doing anything that is aberrant, that all we need to do is have some tough love, or we need to make space so that we're not near this person anymore, so that we are not engaging with this person, even if what they're doing is not harmful. It's just perceived to be wrong.
I absolutely agree with you there. I think that's, I mean, that's neuronormativity in action. That's, I just mean in terms of where ABA practitioners, ABA professionals maintain that ABA is a science.
Oh, definitely.
That's what I'm talking about, like the actual.
Sorry, yeah,
yeah. No, you're totally right.
That it is not just narrowly defined to this ABA space. It is also literally how we set up everything in capitalism and in justice and
oh yeah
and relationships, and like somehow behaviorism, despite the fact that it has no scientific basis, is embedded into like all of our systems, everywhere, at every stage, in the interpersonal space, in the parenting space, in the system space. It is just the way that people think that, oh, if we just punish people enough or reward them enough, then they're going to do what we want them to do. And that's not true. Obviously, we know the science. That's not true. People will do the bare minimum that they can do to get by. But we end up with this really idolized version, especially in ABA. Well, this is no different than that. You're right, but that's wrong too.
Like, oh, yes. And I would say, I would actually suggest that, I mean, really modern society, the whole modern industrial society, capitalism, pre-capitalism, even feudalism, the whole global north and colonizer culture, all of that is, sort of the whole colonialist patriarchal complex going back to, ancient Greece at least, and probably before that, well before that, really, the earliest like cities and wars, and kind of back to the advent of agriculture and labor being imposed on people. There's such a history of human relations being hierarchical and coercive, and that's become integrated where people are raised in authoritarian ways, and so the authoritarian feels natural to them. They're drawn to authoritarian politicians and authoritarian religions because they were raised with authoritarian parents, and that's their model for what authority is. And I think that behaviorism, as as a pseudoscience and as a paradigm in psychology in the mid-20th century, I think it caught on so well because it tapped into that, because it was coercive and authoritarian. And
also that confirmation bias, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It really appealed to people's desire for control. And I know, as a teacher of psychodynamic psychotherapies, I mean, we look at like Sigmund Freud now, and it seems really archaic to us now, but for his time, compared to what how the medical establishment was treating mad and neurodivergent people and such, and women, when Freud came along, that represented an improvement. Like the psychodynamic theories were weirdly liberatory because they were like, open up the unconscious, and and find, like, let's talk about all the repressed material and how people are traumatized in patriarchal culture. And behaviorism was very much a reaction against that. It's like, how can we make psychology palatable to authoritarians again?
I'd like to add in a little, but yeah, pretty much it's behaviorism is pretty much victim blaming, and it's killing us. It's killing all of us. Like, for example, and like Oz, when you said it's like a lot of like parenting, and overall it's like how so much parenting, how they have like, or just like, it feels like when you see like these quips on Facebook from random pages of what's considered mental health, and it's like the most toxic thing I've ever seen, but it's overall considered a healthy mindset. But it's like, no, if you apply that to me, you're going to kill me. For example, like the phrase that I've heard and that's been bestowed upon me and my children a lot is that a child will eat, they'll eat when they're hungry. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about this. They'll just eat when they're hungry. When my neurodivergent people, we know that's not true. Actually, it took me a while to fully understand it myself, because I had OCD-induced bulimia for 15 years, and so my hunger cues were more based on my OCD and were guilt-based. I actually was able to receive ketamine therapy, and for the first time in 15 years, my compulsions and obsessive thoughts were gone, but my ADHD brain was like, room. But it also helped me understand that my ADHD is not a disability. It is not a problem. It's part of who I am. It's not something to be healed, but it helped me understand those hunger cues. And my daughter has ADHD as well. And she's very underweight. And so with her being underweight, it's hard for her to get proper dosage because they're counting on her weight. So I had all of these people around me, and it's like, oh, she'll just eat when she's ready, but they'll put these huge meals in front of her and then get mad when she doesn't eat, get mad when she needs to walk around, and then be like, well, I fed her, she didn't eat, it's her fault. And she is a child and you're supposed to feed her. So instead of what we do now, and I actually had to take her out of, it's part of the reasons why I am homeschooling, is because especially with with COVID precautions, they only give them 15 minutes to eat. And anyone who knows my daughter, she can't eat anything in 15 minutes. So they don't give her enough time to eat, so she doesn't actually have the nourishment and energy that she needs to learn during school. And she's hungry, and then she's overweight, but she can't get the pills that she needs to actually focus. And it's this never-ending cycle because, quote unquote, children will just eat when they need to eat, when it's more than that. And my child is not wrong because you don't understand her, because you have this nice little quote in your head of how to apply to us and apply to my child. So what we do for me to be able to accommodate my child, and it helps me a lot too, who's recovering from this eating disorder, that we eat snacks throughout the day and we check in. And it's like, why don't you take a little nibble of this and see if you actually are hungry? Like, she'll talk to me, it's like, well, my stomach hurts, so I'm not hungry. And I explained to her after finally experiencing the same kind of hunger cue, it's like, that's actually possibly your tummy telling you that you are hungry. I understand it doesn't feel like the other time when you were hungry, but why don't you give this a try? And sure enough, she was starving, but she didn't even know herself, because her hunger cues aren't the same as what somebody else would say. But I've literally had people like gang up on me and tell me why it's okay not to feed my baby because they tried, or because it's so difficult to feed her, because they would never actually try to get to know her, because a child will eat when they're hungry. And how many people go into adulthood and develop eating disorders because of this, because of these little quotes on how we're supposed to behave that blamed us for not being able to adhere to the society that was built up to harm you, that's not built to introspect, for you to understand your trauma, and for other people to understand your trauma, that it's your fault, that pretty much through instilled individualism, through colonialism and white supremacy and capitalism, we're told that if you're not able to do this by yourself, then it's your fault for any harm that you endure. But that's not true. The struggle for survival is a shared burden, and that you are meant to do this together and to be in community. And so you're not supposed, and it's not going to be just some some quote, like saw this quote the other day on Facebook, that it doesn't matter who's right or wrong, that if you keep that anger will poison you if you keep thinking about it. And that is the most victim blaming mindset that I've ever seen in my life, because one, it definitely matters who's right or wrong. Two, pretty much not thinking about the trauma that you're going through, you're most likely to stay in the environment where that trauma is going to keep happening, because you're told that you need to stop thinking about it. And if you do keep thinking about it, it's your fault that you're angry, and that anger is poisoning you. But you have every right to be angry. You have been harmed. You have gone through violence. You have, and you've been told that it's your fault for this violence that keeps happening to you. And that when you finally lash out because you can't take it anymore, that's your fault too. And it's called a lot of times mutually abusive. And I'm not saying that mutual abuse is not a thing, but there's this article that I like to read, and Warren in the comments, he sent it to me a long time ago, and I live by this. It's the violence of dogmatic pacifism. And part of it is the rapist tells the person that they're harming, that they're attacking, not to fight back. The murderer tells the person that they're attacking, not to fight back. When I say violence, I'm answering Elizabeth, like violence is that you having to adhere to a system that does not take you into consideration, that furthers harm you. Like I said, like making my daughter having to eat huge meals 3 times a day that she can't digest. That she can't possibly eat like that. So she goes hungry, she loses weight. That's violence. And then she's expected to operate in a school manner like that. So a lot of this behaviorism is pretty much blaming you so that you can stay underneath the totalitarian, underneath this authority, and you submit to this authority, and it's your fault if you don't submit to this authority. And any pain, any lashing out, anytime you protect yourself, that is you actually being the aggressor. That is actually you being abusive. But I'm here to tell you that your oppressors, your abusers, that authority is not just going to go away because you let them kill you. And that you are not wrong for not letting them killing you. That you're not wrong because when you understand, like, I can't adhere to this. My body can't adhere to this. I am dying. I am screaming and crying that I'm dying. And that is not you being abusive. That is not you being wrong. That is you admitting that I can't adhere to this behavior or to the status quo. And it is violence that is not just put on autistic people, but all of us overall. But when you believe that lie that it's okay, that you're hurting yourself and you're hurting neurodivergent people overall. And that I feel like a better approach is like in decolonizing, is finding something at its base that can work, that can take into consideration that we all have different needs, and then build on there.
You know, Jude, when you said what you said, to add on to that about eating and just behaviorism and all things, even the most basic things like sleeping and eating, those things that we have to do all the time to keep us alive. Autistic people message our social media, they email our site all the time and say, my child was not eating a well-balanced diet, or my child was, a quote, picky eater or whatever. And they tried some kind of therapy for their child that used, and, we've talked about ABA, but I want to say that this is not just ABA. This is an OT. These mindsets are just fueling the undercurrent of all of Western society. And so, and like you said, that 15 minutes to eat. So many of our kids have gastroparesis. They have Ehlers-Danlos and other, medical conditions where they literally can't eat that quickly. It takes me over an hour to eat a very tiny meal, and it's always cold. I never have hot food because I take one bite and I have to wait a long time before I can swallow again. that's autistic people, and I have to walk around, I have to look at something. It's overwhelming to even eat with my neurology and also the trauma that's come along, which is like surviving as a person who's medically different and not being allowed to do, teachers constantly have urinary tract infections because they have to hold it all day. They have to monitor the halls between classes. They have to do lunch duty. And it's in everything, but parents are taking their children because they're worried to these therapists and saying, my child's not getting a well-balanced diet. I'm worried. And what ends up happening is they've used behaviorism on the child to try and force them to eat in ways that are, quote, normal, the ways other people eat that don't work for them. And their children have stopped eating. They've developed eating disorders, and they have feeding tubes. And I knew a woman whose child was so underweight by the time that they had to get a feeding tube that they couldn't even use anesthesia because it would have been life-threatening to perform that surgery. This is what we're doing to our children. This is not, people think that we are too soft. We get called special snowflake all the time as if we are just trying to give our kids, quote, special privileges and let them do whatever they want. And that's why they're, quote, bratty. And that is not the case. It's horrifying to see the actual human collateral of these approaches and what parents who tried, who just didn't know because the, quote, experts have told them, these are the things you're supposed to do. And if it's not working, we got to double down. Let's double the hours that we're going to do this torturous thing to your child. And it's horrifying. I feel like everybody looks like they want to say something. So just let whoever is ready to go next.
You say that about if we just double down. Okay, so my oldest is the only one that gives me consent to talk about him. So that's why I talk about him all the time. And he is going to be 18 in like 6 weeks. He's going to be an adult in just a few weeks. And I'm me and have never been able to get all the behaviorism out of his IEP. It's not even about parents not being aware. If you are, it's still impossible to get it out. You have, like, I'm now trying to do it with my 7-year-old, and it's just as hard with her as it was with him, because people just don't understand this concept of a child will do well if they can. But I hear you saying this, how people are like, oh, this is why your kids are bratty. I want you to sit with my nearly 18-year-old who cries about the fact that he can't control his emotions. That he has tried so hard to just be this person that everyone else is telling him he's supposed to be. And I can sit there and I can say to him, that is not what you need to do. You do not need to hold in. You need to just communicate all these things so we can discuss it, and so you can feel heard and you can feel seen and all these things. And he'll go into a therapy session, or he'll go into his case manager, and he'll come back out and he will get in the car and be like, I'm so glad that I have you as a parent. And that's really, really freaky to hear. First off, that just before 18, my kid recognizes that he's lucky to have me as a parent. Like, that's messed up. That he has that amount of awareness of how bad everything else is. It makes me cry that he has to signal that so that he can know that so he can say he's feeling seen when nobody else does that for him. That's terrible. There's no reason he should feel that way. And the only reason he feels that way is because I have done all the things that show him that who he is matters. And what he needs should be given. And it's not a special snowflake. This is what he needs for survival. To survive for the rest of his life as himself, because that is the biggest threat to all of us, is not surviving what everyone has told us that we have to be. Something that he will never be able to be. And I am happy that he doesn't have to worry about that. I'm happy he doesn't have to worry about being someone he's not. And I'm glad that he can see that he doesn't have to be that person. But it still tears him up inside that he can't be sometimes. Because he wants to be, because he wants to please everyone else. And that is the real threat of not treating us as the whole people we are. We can talk up here, all of us, with all of our expertise and all that, but if we can't help someone like my kid feel the way that he needs to feel, we are not doing enough. And providers that are, and educators that are saying, hey, we are doing all these things to help your kid, if they're not aligning it to where he gets to feel that way, and your child gets to feel that way, and your child and everyone's child gets to feel that way, of not having to break down because of the emotional turmoil of not being able to perform, we are not doing enough.
I have a question for everyone on the panel. And you might need a second to think about it. So whoever's ready to go first, please take the mic. What is one thing that we as an autistic community, as people who are prominent or becoming prominent or have a platform, what is something that we can do ourselves to build community or to work on decolonizing our community? And also, I'd just like to ask the audience the same question. Like, what is something that you would love to see where we can build? There is nowhere in the world where we can thrive. There are not places carved for us. What is something we can do to carve out a place that is safe for all autistic people? And that means even the ones who don't always agree with us, or the ones who are not disability rights activists, or who don't even have a friend, who don't spend time on social media, who one day might get up the courage for the first time to go into Google or go on Facebook and search and find other autistic people. What can we do as a community to make sure that we can bring them in and give them the space that they need?
One thing that I think is very important that I'm really was aiming towards in writing this book and structuring it as I did, working towards this chapter on neuroqueer as a horizon of possibility. We can find ways to create common visions and be working actively towards something positive. And I think that's something that's really missing from a lot of social justice movements and a lot of activism, and especially in our community. You cannot get rid of a bad system by fighting it. You can only get rid of a bad system by building something better. And largely we're failing to do that, and I want to change that. And I'm not a disability rights activist. I don't regard myself as an activist at all. increasingly avoid activist communities because they're so relentlessly negative. It's just a culture of complaint and of people canceling each other and fighting over, who's more of a victim, and there's no unity towards building positive visions of what are we working for. It's all who are we fighting against, and if there's no target immediately at hand, people turn on each other. And I write about this idea of neurocosmopolitanism, this idea of, well, what would a future look like where we made the shift to the neurodiversity paradigm? And my chapter on neurocosmopolitanism is largely asking questions. It's largely questions. A lot of it ends with a lot of questions for reflection, where I encourage the reader to aim there. My writing about neuroqueer is very much about, this is not activism against injustice directly. This is about what are the cool and beautiful things we can do with our divergent minds. What is this as a source of creativity and beauty? What are we working towards? And what are the positive methods that's come up in this conversation already? What are the things we can do when we work with autistic children that actually work for them? What are the things, what kind of spaces do we want to create? And that's what it takes. Where I use the term post-normal in the title of the book. I talk about post-normal possibilities. And this is from the futurist Ziauddin Sardar. And Sardar has sort of created a big shift in the field of future studies over the past decade or so by introducing this idea that we're in post-normal times right now, which means the old systems of normativity are actually collapsing, and they're collapsing slowly. And in the process, the people who are most authoritarian and most attached to the old systems of normativity are becoming increasingly desperate. And so we're seeing increase in atrocity and bigotry and such, but that's because these systems are collapsing, and the old top-down systems of legislation and leadership are collapsing, and fighting them just actually helps to keep them relevant. The important thing is going to be, what do we build as the old system collapses? What do we build to have ready to take the place of everything that's collapsing? And that's the case in terms of how we're going to deal with climate change. How do we build sustainability in the cracks that are available to us? And in terms of neuroqueer spaces, neurocosmopolitan spaces, and queer spaces, and neuroqueer spaces, and decolonized spaces, how do we build things into the cracks? Because the cracks are growing, and the cracks will grow further as we build beauty and build something positive in them. And that's really all I'm interested in pushing for these days. And so often what I see, on social media, which I think, is has been so bad for human discourse in a lot of ways, even though it's also made it accessible to a lot more people. So often somebody proposes something or talks about something positive, and then this includes me. I'll put out a positive idea, or I'll see someone else put out a positive idea about cool things we could do, or hey, try this, and immediately there's people jumping on it saying, oh, this is why that won't work for everyone, this is why it won't work for me. And it's just like, why are you here? What's the point of you if all you can do is shoot down ideas right from the start? Like, no, if you don't think it'll work, then come up with ways that it will. Don't just shoot stuff down. So I think that's what we can do, is just more positivity towards each other, towards the beauty and humanity in each other, instead of just canceling each other for minor disagreements or even major disagreements. And positivity in terms of, what are we working for? What is, if we're saying, not not just our outrage about the injustices that occur and how people are harmed, but what do we want to see instead, and what are the real positive steps and the positive, just having an organizing vision, a shared sense that a better world is possible, and not shooting that down when it's starting to blossom in a conversation.
Jude?
Hey, I'd like to add on to that because I agree and I sort of disagree with that, because I definitely always I teach transformative justice and harm reduction and mutual liberation, and that does come with building system and building networks to support each other and be in community. And that looks like food justice, that does look like economic justice, that does look like being there for each other, being supporting each other, checking in on for each other, building these structures where we actually have people that we can lean on and be in community in this. But at the same time, our oppressors will never give us the tools. Yes, it's collapsing, but a lot of people are not here right now to talk because they were murdered and killed within that system. And a lot of where we are now is because people fought to get there. Now, it does not mean that every type of fighting is actually okay. A lot of the fighting is mirroring white supremacy. It is having the quote unquote oppression Olympics, where that is a problem. That's in a lot of movement spaces, is actually mirroring white supremacy and calling it liberation. But I don't think it necessarily means that not to have the fight. Like I said, if somebody is actively killing you, just you building up the framework for support that's necessary, but that's not going to stop you dying in the moment. And a lot of us, we deserve to see that future. And a lot of that does look like us fighting and defending ourselves, but also building community so we can fight together. That doesn't mean canceling. I don't believe in cancel culture either. But at the same time, I do court watch. And there's a lot of people who are in there because they didn't have anybody there to look out for them, and they're in jail and they weren't even charged with anything there. And so part of the justice system with jails, they're not just going away with collapse. And there's people who are in there now who need people to fight for them, to stand for them, where a lot of the times where it's oh, well, that's violent. And it's well, do you expect me to die? Do you expect me to be like all of those people who before me, who weren't able to speak now because they were killed, because they weren't able to fight back? A lot of the times, I think it's important to understand that you cannot dictate another man's liberation, that timeline for their liberation. Because while somebody else might be okay waiting, a lot more people who have less privilege, they are more likely to die if they do not fight. So I believe it's essential for both, for that you fight so that you can survive now, so that you can make way for that system. So when that collapse does come, that there will be the framework will already be set for that new thing. I think it's necessary that you do both, but also learning what actually fighting for yourself and just mirroring white supremacy is. And I think that's the important thing to differentiate. It's are you actually fighting for liberation, or are you fighting to mirror white supremacy for your own benefit that's actually harming you and everyone around you? And I think that's a big thing to remember.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I'm in complete agreement with that. I think that, I certainly didn't mean to imply that we shouldn't fight. I'm not even in favor of nonviolence, because some things really need to be fought right away, as you say, for survival. And I'm here today because I fought very literally for my survival. I'm a Jew. I'm a descendant of refugees and Holocaust and pogrom survivors. My people are, remain primary targets of white supremacy, or one of the major targets of white supremacist hate crimes. And I, literally have scars on my body from fighting with white supremacists in fights that, I would have been killed if I lost. So it's, so I'm very aware of the necessity for fighting for survival and such. Again, it's just, what are we fighting for? And our own survival is always a good thing to fight for, and the survival of others, other oppressed and marginalized people, always a good thing to fight for. But yeah, what I see again, in is it so easily becomes everything that it's about, and it's so easy. It's like these days, I speak about um, I speak about neuroqueering and about self-liberation and about the beauty of being able to transform our own body minds. And so frequently I get the response is just immediately people looking for the negative and saying, oh, well, some people don't have the privilege to do that. It's like, I mean, these people clearly don't know me, they clearly don't know that, like, I'm, you know, grandchild of refugees, raised in poverty by drug addicts, spent most of my 20s homeless, that I physically had to fight for my life on multiple occasions. I mean, having the stable life I have now where I can be a relatively privileged academic took 40 years of intense struggle. And it's so I'm very familiar with this, but also even while I was fighting for my life and even while I was homeless, I was working towards something positive. I was training, I was continuing my Aikido training, for instance, just continuing like, okay, I have something I'm doing. I have a positive transformation I want to make in myself, and I'm going to do it even though everything sucks. I was teaching Aikido while I was homeless. And I see that too, I mean, it's like, we got to get everybody out of prison. And that might mean physically tearing shit down. But at the same time, there are people in prison who are like, I'm not going to let this crush me. I'm going to meditate every day. I'm going to do yoga every day. Like, even in the worst possible situation, there's a positive vision of who I want to be and how I want to show up in my community. So that's what I want to make sure we don't lose in the process. Yeah.
I think that a little bit of was the way that I phrased the question, and that you were talking about how we show up for each other and how they're hurting, and not how we respond to the rest of the world, the broader world, but the people coming to us. So I think that was more that slight difference in the dialogue there was more the way that I phrased that question was kind of ambiguous, but I was asking, what as a community, when people come to us, what can we do? How can we make an adjustment? Oswin, I feel like you're ready to answer that
yes,
one.
I'm very ready. It's a marrying of the two things that Nick and Jude are saying. It's we need to not fight each other, like Nick is saying, but the ways that Jude is talking about, that we show up and use the same white supremacist playbook. And we see that a lot inside the autistic community all the time, where if you do not have that purity, then you are shut down. You are punished, and then if you do all the things right, then you're rewarded. And so we come back to this behaviorism that is innate to the ways that white supremacy survives. And so we need to stop doing that thing. We need to stop doing it, because what it means is that there is a whole bunch of people that cannot enter into our spaces. We do not have the ability to really have someone like my son come in. I am so thankful that he's not anywhere interested in being part of the autistic community because he would be buried alive because of so much internalized ableism. And that has nothing to do with how he was raised. That has everything to do with society that he has grown up in. And if we cannot have a space where people can come in as autistic people, I'm not talking about saying, yes, everyone should be an ABA. I don't know why you hate it. I am talking about people that come in and they just hate who they are because of what the world has told them that means. And if we can't have a space for that, for those people, if we can't have physical spaces for it, if we can't have online spaces for it, if we just don't have anywhere for those people to turn, the outcomes are bleak. And we are upholding those white supremacist values. And we do so because, by and large, the autistic community is white. Everyone goes to the power that they have, unless you don't have any power. And then where do you have to go? And right now, that is not the autistic community. And it won't be the autistic community until the autistic community stands up and makes a space for people who are hurting and who have been hurt by society like we all have, without punishing people for taking in those values. Like, it's not a person's fault if they take in those values. We all grapple with it every day, every single one of us. And it takes so much to break down those barriers in our own heads about our own selves. And then we turn against ourselves or others like us because they don't have the ideological purity that we have. And I mean, Nick, I know you know this better than anyone. I know how many people have come after you. Like, we've known each other for too long. You know how many people have come after me too.
Sometimes the same people.
Shockingly. Sorry, sarcasm for anyone that didn't catch
Right
that.
here with you all.
If we don't have that ability to like just hold a space for people to break down with like-minded people, with like-minded or like, and when I say like-minded, I mean like literally like-minded, like our neurology, and not necessarily our values, because at that point our values don't align. But that does not mean that we can't guide those values and those principles. I do it every day with neurotypical people. If I can do it with neurotypical people who do not understand us, we should be able to do it with neurodivergent people who are like us.
Bravo.
Yes. I want to say to, like, when people come in and they're new, they don't know any of their internal customs, their social rules, their language, because they've not been with us, and often they've not really been with anyone. They've not had friends. They've spent so much of their time socially isolated to the point where they, even the most basic, human rules of interaction that are not just autistic or just disability community, but just no one has taken the time to show them what healthy relationships and unconditional love look like. And so they come in and they have all the wrong words, and they end up getting educated even by people who are kind. It's like we just start throwing all these articles at them and all this education instantly, and it sends the message like, you have to know all these things before you can sit with us. And yeah, Mike said, remember when I got dragged for liking Temple Grandin? Yeah, I mean, you're allowed to relate to who you want. You will find someone. I mean, hey, that was available to you and you found it, and that was something that was meaningful to you. And just to say that out loud when you haven't been brought in. And it's okay if you like it, even if you were brought into the community. But yeah, I do remember seeing you get dragged in a horribly cruel way for not knowing why other people don't like Temple Grandin. That's not okay for us to do to people, and we do that. So I would like to see us have less ableism towards other autistic people. We know that we have communication differences. And also, when you have an autistic advocate who's out there working for free, just busting themselves, trying so hard to make a better future for the people that they love, that their community, and they mess up and they say the wrong things, or they have a bout with mental illness, and they just and they actually are making mistakes. Let's look at the totality of who they are and not that 1 minute, and bring that minute up for the rest of their lives. I just would love to see us decolonize our own. Like, our ableism is behaviorism. It is saying that you have to perform these behaviors, you have to use this language. And I just hope that we can move past that. And we're past time, and that's okay, because we don't do rules or schedules, and you can leave whenever you want if you need to, and this will be recorded. But Kate or Cheyenne, do you have Kate? I see you're ready.
Yeah, sure. I know that if I talk, my mic doesn't crackle, so I'll try and talk. Yeah, a lot of what has already been said, and I think it brings us back. There's a really nice circularity here, because Nick, your opening chapter about the master's tools is where we've arrived back at, right? What has been used to oppress us will never free us. And when we're expecting this impossible perfectionism from people, and then beating them down when they can't perform it to a high enough standards, because of course they can't, then we're just no better. We're just creating more oppression, more marginalizing of people. So yeah, I would like us to be able, I know that we're traumatized and our nervous systems are frazzled, and but I would like to see some compassion, some holding of our own humanity and other people's humanity in the autistic community. And also, like, I'm not someone who very easily shows up in autistic community online. I find it terrifying. But what I can do is play my part in my field in my own way, and show up every day for that, and be openly autistic and a therapist, and be there for the conversations when people say, oh, but autistic people don't have empathy. And there's work that I'm doing with other neurodivergent therapists around looking at the inherent ableism in psychotherapy, and reviewing our materials and challenging our education system, so that there is room for more autistic, more neurodivergent people in education, and they can get through exam systems and accreditation processes, because they're not ruled out. They don't fall at the first hurdle because we've kept them out of it with gatekeeping. So yeah, like, show up and be compassionate. And if the autistic community is too much for you, and it might be because it's a lot, just show up in whatever small way you can, because it's still huge and it still matters and it changes everything.
That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that. Cheyenne, do you have something?
Well, now I have to follow Kate. No, I agree so much with what's already been said, and I think, just to piggyback off of that, I would say just be open to acknowledging that your reality isn't the only reality, and listening to your peers, regardless of what background they come from, especially if there are more marginalized backgrounds that aren't uplifted, that aren't supported as much. And just learn as much about you and the other issues that are present within the community, whether they apply to you or not, because that's a way that you can always support someone else.
I love that so much. I would like to specifically say that we need to listen to and read from and support and comment on the articles and poetry of non-speaking autistic people who often need a support, a communication partner to get online, and so they can't. They have to fight their body to be able to type when they have apraxia, and so the amount that they give that might take a lot of us, 3 minutes to type might take them days of trying to stay regulated enough. And that I would love to see us all work together to come through for non-speakers and in the ways that they need. And yeah, so that's it. And I feel like we're good at this point. But if anybody has a closing comment before we end the broadcast, then feel free.
I do want to say, yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful. And I do want to say, I so appreciate what all of you brought in to this last bit of the conversation, in particular, Oswin and Kate, and what you brought in. And it's just, it connects for me to what I'm talking about in terms of working for something positive and having a positive vision of what we want. I think this compassion is a key part of it. That you obviously, if someone has been taught to hate, or it should be obvious, but apparently isn't to many people, if someone's been taught to hate themselves, you don't heal that by rejecting them. So I think that part of what I mean by having a positive vision is just in dealing with each and every human being, think, what's my goal here? What's my goal? Is my goal to send this person away in tears and crush them? Because people behave as if that's their goal, and I think they'd be appalled if they realized that was the goal they were serving. For the most part, it's like, what is my goal? What do I want from this person who's using this terrible self-pathologizing language? Well, I want them to heal and start to love themselves. So how can I deal with them in a way that encourages that? And I think that on a large societal scale and a long-term, build a better world scale, and just on an individual one-on-one human scale, having a positive vision and really thinking about what's my goal here, and is what I'm doing actually serving that goal? I think that's one of the most important things we can have in our minds.
Beautifully said.
Can I go ahead?
Sure.
I agree with you, Nick. My coming out of ASAN, just put it out there. I didn't feel like I did a good job there because I didn't hold on to my core values of respecting people. And I very much believe in respecting and kindness towards people because I do not know their story. Like that is a guiding principle for me. And I lost my way for a bit there because I was told to. And building something new. I mean, I've had to do that because nobody else is going to. It's why FDM exists, because nobody was building something to replace. And all of this goes back to that underlying, we all have value because we exist. And if we can't show that kindness, if we can't show that acceptance, and if we can't do all these things with each other and show how it's done, because we have to show how it's done or else nobody will ever believe us. They won't believe us because we're autistic. We have to prove it to them before they ever start accepting what we say is valid, because we're so pathologized. Like, we're just so pathologized. Our existence is. And so if we can't show that kindness, and we can't have that underlying value of kindness, then we will never, ever be able to break free.
That was beautiful. And I think that was a perfect place for us to thank everyone for coming. Thank you, especially, to our panelists, Dr. Walker. Thank you for the beautiful book. It's a gift to our community. You've already done the community building work, and you've been doing it a long time. And Oswin, same for you. I don't know if there's anyone out there that I've learned more from, and I don't even think you knew how much I was learning from you. So just all that you've done to build community for so long has just meant so much to me. And I feel like I'm a lot better at advocacy because of the work that you've done, and Nick and elders in our community. So just thank you all. Thank you to our wonderful audience. We have 50,000 followers yesterday, and we just became an org last year. We were a blog before that, and we're new-ish. And so thank you to our amazing community, and we will be doing this a lot more often now. And yeah, we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.